everyone, it's your boy, Nicole. All right, so this is another mini-sode, so I'm going to get into it. I know we've been waiting a long time for this one, and I'm ready for it. It's my boyfriend, the Mothman. Ooh! I have an audience today, but it's just me on this one, so if I get awkward, it's because they're staring at me. But let's get started, guys. Alrighty. So, on November 12th, 1966, in Clendenin, and guess where it is? West Virginia, the usual place. A gravedigger working in a cemetery spotted something strange. He glanced up from his work when something huge soared over his head. A massive figure that was moving rapidly across the cemetery from tree to tree. He would later describe the figure as a brown human being, which in itself is kind of problematic, but let's continue. This was the first reported sighting of what could be known as the Mothman, an elusive creature that, although now widely celebrated by the town it once terrorized, remains as mysterious as it was on the night that a few frightened witnesses first laid eyes on it. Just 3 days after the gravedigger's initial report in nearby Point Pleasant, West Virginia, two couples noticed a gray winged creature about 6 or 7 feet tall standing in front of the car they were all seated in. Eyewitnesses Roger Scarberry and Steve Mallett told the local paper, the Point Pleasant Register, that the beast had bright red eyes, about 6 inches apart, a wingspan of 10 feet, and that it seemed to want to avoid the bright headlights of a car. According to the witnesses, the creature was able to fly at incredible speeds, perhaps as much as about 100 miles per hour, one of the men told reporters, although all agreed it did make for a clumsy runner on the ground. Don't make fun of my boy. They knew this because the creature allegedly chased their moving vehicle to the outskirts of the town in the air, then scuttled into a nearby field and disappeared. Knowing how absurd this must have sounded to a local paper in a small Appalachian community in the 1960s, Scarberry insisted that the apparition couldn't have been a figment of his imagination. He assured the paper, quote, "If I had seen it while by myself, I wouldn't have said anything, but there were 4 of us who saw it," end quote. The papers at this point were skeptically calling it a bird and a mysterious creature, though they did print Mallett's description. It was like a man with wings. But more and more sightings were reported in the Point Pleasant area over the next year as the legend of the Mothman took shape. The Gettysburg Times reported 8 additional sightings in the short span of 3 days following the first claims, including 2 volunteer firefighters who supposedly saw what they described as a very large bird with large red eyes. One sighting reported by Salem, West Virginia resident Newell Partridge told of strange patterns that appeared on his television screen one evening, followed by a mysterious sound just outside of his home. Shining a flashlight toward the direction of the noise, Partridge supposedly witnessed 2 red eyes resembling bicycle reflectors looking back at him. This anecdote remains a popular one in the Mothman mythos. I have a dyslexia right there, especially because it resulted in the disappearance of Partridge's dog, supposedly to the clutches of the fearsome beast. Dr. Robert L. Smith, associate professor of wildlife biology at West Virginia University, dismissed the notion that a flying monster was stalking out the town, instead of attributing the sightings to a sandhill crane, which stands almost as tall as an average adult man and has bright red flesh around its eyes. The explanation was compelling, especially given the numbers of early reports that had described the creature as bird-like. Some even hypothesized that the crane was perhaps deformed, especially if it made its home in the TNT area, what locals call a series of nearby bunkers that were used for manufacturing munitions during World War II. It has been suggested that the bunkers had leaked toxic materials into the neighboring wildlife preserve. Another Point Pleasant legend states that the creation of the Mothman was nothing more than the work of one very committed prankster who went so far as to hide in the abandoned World War II munitions plant where many of the sightings occurred. The theory goes that when the national press ran with the Mothman story, spreading it across the country, panic set in. locals became convinced they were seeing the Mothman in birds and other large animals, even long after the prankster had given up. The Mothman also bears a striking resemblance to several demonic archetypes found among those who have experienced sleep paralysis, perhaps suggesting that the visions are nothing more than the embodiment of typical human fears, pulled from the depths of the unconscious and grafted into a real-life bird or animal sightings where people panic. Then there are paranormal explanations, a morass of complicated theories that weave together aliens, UFOs, and precognition. They paint the Mothman as either a harbinger of doom or, more sinisterly, its cause, a legend that has its roots in the tragedy that befell the Point Pleasant community shortly after the Mothman arrived. On December 15, 1967, just over a year after the first Mothman sighting, traffic was especially bad. The Silver Bridge, built in 1928 to connect Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, was packed with cars from end to end. Without warning, a single eye-bar near the top of the bridge on the Ohio side cracked. The chain snapped, and the bridge, its careful equilibrium disturbed, fell to pieces, plunging cars and pedestrians into the icy water of the Ohio River below. 46 died, drowned, or crushed in the wreckage. It was the second terrible and bizarre thing to put on a small community of Point Pleasant on the map in a year, and some connected the two. In 1975, author John Keel conflated the Mothman sightings and the bridge disaster, as well as reported UFO activity, to create his book, The Mothman Prophecies. His story took hold, and the town became an icon among conspiracy theorists, UFOologists, and fans of the paranormal. Point Pleasant's fame as a home of the Mothman legend hasn't waned in recent years. In 2002, a movie based on Keel's book rekindled interest in the Mothman. In the Mothman's Prophecies film, Richard Gere plays a reporter whose wife seems to have witnessed the Mothman shortly before her death. He finds himself inexplicably in Point Pleasant several years later with no idea how he got there, and he's not the only one in the area having trouble explaining himself. Several locals are experiencing premonitions of distant disasters, and there's talk of visitations from a mysterious figure called the Mothman. The film has a supernatural horror and mystery, offers no conclusions, communicating instead of an eerie feeling of disjointedness that was both panned and praised by critics. Most notably, the film popularized the image of a Mothman as a harbinger of doom. The idea that visitations from the Mothman predicting disasters led some believers to make ties to the Chernobyl disaster of 1986, the Mexican swine flu outbreak of 2009, and the 2011 nuclear disaster in Fukushima, Japan, among others. The Mothman can still be seen in Point Pleasant, West Virginia today, in the form of a historical museum open 7 days a week, and also as a 12-foot tall chrome-polished statue, complete with massive steel wings and ruby red eyes. A festival commemorating the Mothman's visits has taken place annually for years, a fun celebration that attracts locals and tourists alike. So that was the Mothman, and I love him so much, and I want to take a field trip over to West Virginia. But that was it for this mini-sode. Thank you so much for listening. My name's Nicole from Cheers from the Grave. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Cheers from the Grave, Twitter at Cheers from Grave, and you can find all other links on our link tree, linktr.ee/CFTG. Alrighty, stay spooky. Bye.